life in 3 dimensions got me bent and got me twisted. I know I done said a lot, but I should probably stop pretending. I don't really hold the key and I can't really push a button. I just step up to the mic and try my very best to bust it, but I ran out of breath. It's tight in my chest, my feet just might fail. I can't stand the pressure.
Welcome back, everyone, to Racially Speaking, where we have real and honest conversations about race as it's viewed through the lenses of faith, family, and vocation. As always, I'm your host, David Phipps. And look, first, prayers up for John Mark. He was supposed to make his way back and join me, but look, I jinxed him a couple episodes ago. And I think I said this in my one I put out a couple days ago, but he's got COVID, him and his whole family. So prayers up for them. They've all been got it at the same time. So hopefully they knock it all out quickly, make a big comeback, but be thinking about him. We miss him. We're going to miss him in this conversation. But rest assured, it's not been too long if you are a regular listener, but I am joined by everyone's favorite guest, truly pretty much guest, co-host, your family on this show, especially the Alethea Lamberson. Leith, welcome back.
Thanks, David. What's up, y'all? Like I said before, it's always good to be back on the Racially Speaking pod. Always feel honored when you ask me to join. Missing you, John Mark. Gotten used to you being in here in our conversation, so praying for you, bud. But yeah, it's good to be back.
Yeah. I mean, I think he always misses being here, but who knows how much he'll miss having this conversation once we get into it. I think he'll miss it. He'll miss it. We love you, John Mark.
We do.
All right, before we hit record, Leith, you said you got questions down, or we're just gonna roll with it. And usually we have some set, like, okay, we know where we're going, what topics, maybe what questions we're gonna bounce off each other. But today, I just kind of we're just going to kind of go for it even more than usual and roll with, I mean, it's not like we don't know what we're going to talk about, but kind of take the conversation where it goes as we usually do, but more so than usual. So I'll set us up a little bit. First, a couple of days ago, I put out an episode on my own, just solo. First time I've ever done that. Probably the last time I'll ever do that. Who knows? But anyway, this is a little bit of a follow-up to that one. It was kind of I just put out a real, honest kind of state of the union of myself and my heart for what's been going on the past couple weeks. It came directly after, I think, was it Friday that the body cam footage of the murder of Tyre Nichols was released by the Memphis Police Department. Also following a slew of other things that have really just happened, even if we stuck with only 2023. So it's been a lot as it relates to things we've been already unpacked here on the podcast. And that if you're somebody that follows these stories and care about social justice in any way, you are well aware of all this stuff going on. And, Leith, we're going to get into this, but I hit a wall this past weekend, as I shared a little bit. So I say all that. So if you haven't listened to the episode, you don't need to. Could be helpful with some of the things we'll allude to, but you also don't need to. But just want to put that out there. And follow Leith on social media. Leith, you put out a great, much shorter video also on some of your kind of raw thoughts on where you were at. So I love that video as well. But look, there's a lot going on, and one to kind of follow up that is, I've had a few days, you've had a few days, 4 or 5 days, however long it's been. I don't even know what day of the week it is now. Tuesday.
Yeah.
When we're recording. And so have some time to process, think through some stuff. But what I don't want to do is just move on. We both have to move on, but don't want to completely move on and put that in the review mirror so quickly. So wanted to actually have a conversation to follow up kind of my processing personally. And I think it will hopefully be helpful to everyone listening. So lethal, I'll start here. How are you doing? And we'll start kind of broad and then go a little more specific, maybe even just following your thoughts that you posted. What it was like, was it Saturday or Friday?
Yeah.
Even? Okay.
Yep.
On how you're doing. And this is following right after the body cam footage of what happened to Tyre Nichols in Memphis was released.
Yeah. How am I doing? You know, always a loaded question that I think I'm still trying to figure out, honestly. You know, I can kind of share even leading up to where I'm at right now, but you know, I had seen on social media, they were, you know, this like would pop up, you know, like Memphis police officers, you know, pull over Tyre Nichols, and then 3 days later he dies. And so I would see it pop up and I'm like, I just don't even want to engage it. And so I was trying to avoid it. And you can only avoid it so much when you're on social media, when it gets to the point when they are prepping you for the footage to be released. And I knew I wasn't going to watch it. But I started seeing people's reactions to it and hearing what people were saying about it on Instagram and on TikTok. So I was like, I'm not going to watch it, but I now have an idea of just how horrific it is. And some people still don't understand, you know, putting up the sensitive content warning or trigger warnings when they post certain things. So I saw a couple of things that I wish I wouldn't have seen. And really what started to happen for me on Friday was I had just finished I was reading one of my friend's books, and I had just read this like really beautiful chapter. I was like deep in my feels. And so I like put it down, just like kind of soak it in. And a few minutes later I got on, I think it was TikTok. And I just felt this kind of wave come over me of, okay, I don't want to deal with this. And it just like feeling the numbness was coming quickly, being desensitized to such violence and tragedy. And so what I did was I called one of my friends. I said, I need to talk to another Black person. So I called one of my dear friends, and she didn't answer right away. So I was like, oh, okay, who else can I call? And then she called me back a few minutes later, and we had a really good conversation that started out very much like, how do we not be numb and desensitized to this? And be frustrated that we're having this like similar conversations that we had 3 years ago. And our conversation ended with one of like encouragement and hope. And I wasn't expecting that. And so I think that's part of what kind of helped propel me when I went into Saturday. And it was just still lingering over me, but I was like, I need to process, like, and what do I need to? Okay, I'm talking to people, but man, I think I need to say something on social media. And so that's what prompted my little 10 minutes of just observations I've been making, and actually really helped me. Like I got out of the house, I was at a park a few minutes away from my house. So being outside like was good for my body and my mind. I knew I needed that, and I knew I needed to articulate what I was seeing, and in a way that I was being very direct, but it was very gracious in the way that I was being direct. But I think I had just hit a point where I want to help people, and I want to help educate people. But there comes a point where it's like, people just really aren't trying to learn, you know, like I don't want to keep talking about the history of policing because we talked about that 3 years ago. And we've talked about it since then, before just a few days ago. The social construct of race. Race isn't prevalent because there's 5 Black officers. I'm like, okay, have y'all read anything since 2020? You know, like I'm feeling some of that. And so, you know, even today I was talking with one of my best friends, and she was making an observation about how I was processing. And I just told her, like, I feel things, but I don't really know how to name it at the moment. But I think part of what's helping me even today is I've still been able to find like levity in my day. Like just, I had quiet time this morning, just intentional time, sitting with the Lord. I needed it. I worked out, I listened to music, I laughed with friends. Like those things have been helping me, but it doesn't mean the cloud of what we're dealing with in our country has left. And so it's helping me stay afloat, I think. But I feel a few different things, and it's not one specific thing. It's kind of a number of things that kind of throughout the day I feel pop up. And so just trying to be aware enough to respond to it when I need to, and keep asking myself, what do I feel like I need? So even when you said, hey, do you want to hop on the pod? I knew it was a yes. It's always a yes, but like, especially after listening to what you shared, I'm like, man, to be able to be in community with people who are doing similar work, we need to be able to be honest and have these conversations and talk about this stuff together. So as hard as this is, I was looking forward to this time even because I was like, this is actually helpful for my processing too. So
good.
That's how I'm doing.
No, appreciate it. That's always the hope to anyone that comes on here. I hope it is not even just for times like now, especially for times like now, but that it's cathartic, therapeutic for anybody that comes on. So love to hear that. Can you share, because I think this would be helpful, selfishly for me, but then I think others will relate to this, but like going from feeling pretty worried about being too desensitized or maybe not having hope, and then talking to your friend, like, can you pinpoint at all what allowed you to leave that conversation feeling hopeful? Because you said, I actually left kind of hopeful. Sounded like maybe you didn't expect to leave that way.
I don't think either of us expected to leave for our conversation to end the way that it did. Because when she answered we were on FaceTime when she answered, and she was just shaking her head. She was just she's like, I'm just frustrated. And I think we had space to be honest with how we were feeling, whether it's frustration, whether it was the wrestling of how do we not just be numb and desensitized to it, to her sharing how she just knows, like, for such a time as this is what she is called and committed to with the work that she does and the way that she does it. And so she wants to be faithful to that. And so when she said that, it shifted something in me it does feel hopeless at times. And it does, like we both talked about, like the things that we want to see change, like it feels so far off. So does this matter what we do? You know, her creative work, me doing a podcast, me being a consultant.
Yes.
Like, does that matter? And we both were able to encourage one another to say it does, because God has given us skills and gifts, and there's unique ways that we get to use those. And so even if we don't see police reform tomorrow, later this year, next year, we can hold space for our lament, for our frustration, for the, like, is this actually ever going to change? And at the same time, be faithful to what God's asked us to do in our lives right now with what he's given us. And I really wasn't expecting that. And so I think when I felt that shift in the conversation where she just started sharing, and I was like, yeah, what we do matters. It matters. The enemy would really want us to be like, okay, we're done. Just, close up shop, put the mics away, don't do consulting work. I'm a DEI consultant. And so, I could do that, but I think it was just something that was happening in the midst of our conversation where, I would say, as someone who's a faithful person, I think it was a Holy Spirit moment for the both of us that helped us come above initially what we were feeling. It didn't make those things go away per se, but it really helped us to focus and say, like, but what has God asked us to do? And if people don't care, they don't care, but there are people who do. So we're going to let's stay committed to what we feel the Lord's asked us to do. And so that's how we got to where we were. And we both just, like, we literally said at the end, like, man, I really need that conversation. Like, I actually feel really encouraged now. That was super helpful. She's like, thanks for calling me, So I was just calling to, like, vent and be like, how do I not just act like this doesn't matter when it does? I know that it does. And those, I want to be honest too, like that. And I appreciate David. If y'all didn't listen to what David shared, I texted you 10 minutes in and said, thank you for your honesty. Because sometimes I don't think either we're not honest enough, those of us who are in this space doing the work that we do, or I don't know if people who don't do this type of work realize some of the things that we wrestle with, internally. And so I appreciated how honest you were of, like, is this podcast worth it? Like, is it worth it to keep talking about this stuff? Because here we are. And I think that's a very real thing. that we need to be able to articulate, but not stay there, right? And I actually, Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. King's book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? I picked that up yesterday morning. And it's one of his best works, I would say. He obviously did incredible stuff, but what he's doing what he does in the beginning of that book, he says, where are we? And so he's recounting, it's 1967. And so he's like, hey, here's where we are. You know, he says, Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And basically everyone thought, oh, everything, we're good. And then he was like, and a year later, here's where we are. But does that mean we haven't made progress? Because then he goes, well, let's look back 10 years ago. 10 years ago, we were not where we are now. And so it was helpful for me. I need to go back to people like that. I think that's what where I'm at is I need to engage real time with people who are doing it. And I need to also continue to be reminded and learn from the people who've gone before me, who had the same questions, I believe, who wrestled with some of the same things, who fought for bills to be passed, and then to see them actually be applied take years to come to fruition. And that's Dr. King talks about that, you know, when Brown v. Board was, you know, desegregation of schools, the Supreme Court said, well, we'll just give it to the states though, and then they can determine at what rate they want that to happen. So he's talking about in some schools it was quick, and some it was years later that they were desegregated. So anyways, I think it's important for us to be honest about where we're at and make sure we don't get stuck there, you know? But I don't want us to not be human, you know? I think that's that's a very human response, like what you shared and what we're talking about. So.
Well, it was helpful for me to do that, I think, but at the same time, like I didn't want to, in the sense of like, I didn't want to be in that place. And like on that note, like I'll say, for me, it was really helpful to have several similar conversations, like the one you said you had with your friend, that I kind of stumbled into. Like for me, it wasn't like a planned one, like, okay, I need to talk to somebody. It was actually catching up with one of my mentors, and somebody that would ask me how I'm doing in the midst of stuff. But this person asked me how I was doing. I think it was in relation to the shootings in California and that were affecting the Asian community, and I appreciated it. And then, but you know, to be honest, like on that note, I was kind of just like, I kind of feel numb because it was different. Like on that alone, I was kind of talking about like, you know, I appreciate you asking, like, it doesn't feel the same as like an outright hate crime. Like, you know, has been done in Atlanta or towards the Asian community, or obviously in Buffalo more recently towards the Black community. So like, doesn't make it better, but I was like, I'm just much more concerned with mass shootings happening every single day. All of that. And yes, mass shootings affect, as I mentioned, communities of color disproportionately. And that's a different conversation, but I'm just more overwhelmed with, of course, I heard for the community that the American Asian communities that are hurting in the midst of that stuff, but I was more in the side of, or not side, but in the frame of mind of, I don't necessarily personally feel as emotional or grieved as I have in the past for, you know, specific hate crimes. And then I kind of this person didn't mean to put me in that state, but it kind of sent me down that path of, which I ended up sharing on that episode of, wait a second, like, why does any of this matter? And this is after we knew that the Tyre Nichols video was coming out and all that had happened. I had followed stories, which I feel like has gotten swept under the rug, but Keenan Anderson, who was tased and passed away, and tased to death and passed away in the hospital in cardiac arrest. Being desensitized to more and more stories like that. And then as I've seen, you know, the statistics on police brutality being up and just all these things. And then I think just the tipping point as I was literally processing some things kind of just off the cuff was just like, all this is pointless. All this is pointless. And I just had to I said that out loud to this person. It's like, what is the point? Like, why should I keep going? And it wasn't, I want people to understand the human side of it is I wasn't even in a place of doubting overall hope. I don't know if this is where you were at. I wasn't in a place of doubting all of life or that God is not in control or that there's not hope. It was literally on me in a sense of what is the point of having, this size platform, which is not large, and having these conversations. What's the point of any sacrifice I make or we make in these spaces when the needle is moving backwards? And so I say all that because it is helpful, because I think head knowledge wise, I knew that, okay, all these, the MLKs and stuff went through this, all these older people. It's naive of me to feel like this if I can't, they went through all this stuff. But still in my mind, I'm there's something I feel uncomfortable comparing me to that. That also doesn't feel helpful. To feel oh, well, this is what Dr. King went through or something. It's I just want to live my life. I didn't, but then I forget, like you said, they were asking the same questions. They also wanted to not be in this space as well. And it doesn't matter, if you're a civil rights leader and everyone knows who you were or anything in between. So, I mean, I say all that to say it was helpful to have over these few years had a community around me that I felt comfortable being that honest with in a way that was just free to say all that with, and knowing that any scripture or pointing to God that was going to be said to me was real and genuine. It wasn't just a Band-Aid fix of look, God works everything out and you're going to be fine, which is true. But, it was real and it was specific scripture. I was oh man, okay, I didn't even know that was in there. Okay, that's speaking directly to where I'm at. And it wasn't somebody that was going to just say, oh yeah, you're right. You're not doing it. You should step back and don't think twice. But it was somebody else entering in of here's why what you're doing is important.
It's good.
You need to keep going. Don't be essentially fooled by the lies of this doesn't matter. Even when I pushed back, they were ready, in a loving way of I hear you. Make me understand that is true. You can tell me all this matters. That feels nice. I'm not fishing for that. Tell me why you think this matters. Because all I see is 2020. That's when everyone understood racism, right? That's when everyone understood police brutality.
That's what they said.
In history. Yeah. And that's when all this legislation is going to happen. This is going to stop happening. That's the silver lining of George Floyd's murder. And then here we are, like you said, 3 years later, having the exact same conversations in the exact same scenario. And that was the catalyst for a lot of stuff I think we do. It hit me like a brick wall and I didn't see it coming. And I thought, what's the point? It's because the sacrifice it takes to do something like this, to me, isn't worth it. That some people can throw some headphones in and hear some stories and get a little bit of head knowledge of oh, okay, I understand where, the plight of people of color a little better. I'm good. And not translating into legislation, police reform, gun reform, and all this. And so for the sake of in danger of repeating everything I've already put out, I do want people to actually hopefully walk away with some, on that note, with some kind of way forward. We don't have all the answers, but
no,
I would wonder, okay, so there's a lot of different topics flying around out there about specifically with the Tyre Nichols footage being released and the different elements that happened surrounding all of that. Not sure exactly where to start. What are your thoughts on you've posted about this, so we'll start with this history of policing. And I don't want to spend too much time here, but I do want to make sure everyone tracks and we're on the same page. So the 5 officers that were have been arrested, fired, charged for his murder were all black men, all black officers. Naturally, people are saying, okay, this instance isn't a race problem because they're all black. How would you eloquently and, as you said, gently in your words explain the misconception of that sentiment?
Yeah. So my first thing would be to push people to, go research the history of policing. So what you're going to find is slave patrols. And so essentially this was instituted to control those who were enslaved. And so there was this sentiment of like controlling the black body, right? If you dehumanize it, but you can control it too, and you make it do what you want it to do, i.e. we have slavery. And that's why this country is begun to be so wealthy, right? Like that was the start of it. And so, obviously there were people who were enslaved were trying to escape. And so it was all about control. And so that's the roots, the foundation of policing, right? Obviously it has evolved. Everything evolves. Slavery evolved into mass incarceration. Another conversation for another time, but that would be my first thing, because if you look into the history of policing, you look at slave patrols, it was not just white people who were on slave patrols. They actually had black people who would chase other black people who were trying to escape from slavery. And so that's why when people say, well, race doesn't matter because the officers are black. There's someone who, I forget, I saw it on Instagram or TikTok a day or two ago, and it was TikTok. They were referencing an Ice Cube song, and and essentially Ice Cube's reference to NWA,
the NWA song.
So Ice Cube's rapping in this part of the song, and I'm going to paraphrase, but he's essentially talking about if you have an interaction with the police, you should actually hope it's a white one, because there's something that happens when, and this is not true for all black police officers, let me be clear. But because of the foundation and the roots of policing, there's something that happens inside some officers who are black, for a variety of reasons. And so that's what I would say for people. It does matter, because there's the connection that's all connected to, right? So the history of policing plus race, it's all connected, but you have to understand where it started to understand how it's playing out today. And so for me, I saw when they showed the faces of the officers, and it was 5 black ones. I felt a range of emotions, but I wasn't surprised. Like I wasn't surprised that 5 black men could do that to another black man. It did not shock me at all, because I've seen that play out in other instances. And so there's something about maybe putting on that badge. You have this feeling of superiority, of power. But what they found out was they don't actually get off as easily as their white counterparts, because I don't know any case, and someone please correct me if I'm wrong, but I haven't seen any case where the action of firing, charging was so fast. Like so fast, like that. And so
eerily fast.
Yeah. I was like, that's interesting. So also pay attention to that. Again, race is a factor in in this conversation, in this situation, even in that right there of how quickly they were fired and charged with second-degree murder among a few other charges. That means something. Like we can't gloss over that. You gloss over it if you don't understand the social construct of race, why race became a social construct. Somewhere in the 1700s, the first census is when race became a thing. in this country. And so it's all connected. And so that's what I would encourage people. That's where you need to start, and not try to dissect or separate someone in a police uniform from their race, because they unfortunately they go hand in hand. So that's where I would, my encouragement would be to start.
Yeah. You have to connect if you were pushing back at all before, you have to be willing to connect the power dynamic with policing. I know power or privilege, all those are buzzwords now, but you have to be willing to go there and see that the badge, the blue is the problem. Not all police, like you said, I want to be clear, not all police, but the structure from the beginning, if the foundation was used to corral slaves and to use Black bodies for at their disposal, at those in power's disposal, then the system was built this way. It's not just a tagline. The system was built this way, and the people that say repeatedly that it is functioning exactly how it was built to, that's why. Like, that's not just hyperbole out there. It's like, no, that's literally fact, and that doesn't take reading a whole book. That takes like doing some loose research. I did want to say something. Like, my observation was when I saw that all 5 police officers were Black, I don't want to say shocked, but I was surprised in a sense of, I feel like I haven't seen, or like, it was a surprising thing, because I feel like the bigger stories, at least with police brutality, are not always, like, the ones I've seen at least, aren't with Black officers usually. So I was surprised in this, I was surprised, like you're saying, not because they were police officers, but surprised how personal and how deep. And I'd wonder, me not being Black, but I would just imagine it was a different kind of disorienting to see any part of the video or read about it. I also did not watch, but stuff I've heard about it, the sound, I don't know if you've heard this at all, but I heard that if you listened to any of it, even, you could hear just the tone of the officers as they continued to brutalize Tyre Nichols, that their vernacular even sounded just kind of like it was just a fun activity. Like, I've seen a headline like that they referred to him as, the human pinata for these guys. And that the vernacular was just like, I don't want to try to like say it, but it was like a game. Like, the level of dehumanization that was going on there was just like, it was, I can't even think of a proper word. And so I would imagine that was disorienting. It was disorienting for me, again, as somebody who's not Black, to see like, what, like, I would just imagine that, I would assume, I mean, there's 5 of them, that there's some level in their family, even of how they were raised. I'm assuming of like I'm just assuming there's got to be some of their parents or caretakers or whatever in their family just grieving in a different way, because they had to have had to talk about how to navigate the police as young Black men growing up, or I don't know. It was just, to me, I was like, how did it come to this? And so that was kind of the shocking part of just not that it happened, but then when I heard about what the sound sounded like, of just like, oh man, it sounded like it was a sporting event. Like, oh man, like I got, a couple shots in, or, this, I think they were talking about, oh man, he was strong. And like, I don't like, I think I pulled a muscle or something.
Wow.
That was just, a different level, and that hard to hear, but then also I think gives motivation for more of urgency to understand how deep this runs.
Yeah.
And that it's hard to enter or to take time explaining, like you did so eloquently, but like explaining what I think we consider basic level stuff that we just have to be willing to do on our own to then understand how to move forward.
And let me speak to, just real quick, what you were saying.
Yes.
Just not being Black and just even hearing that. And I didn't, I heard that they, I think, laughed. I hadn't even heard some of that, which like really grieves me. It also confirms like there's a few things that I think, again, some assumption, informed assumption. I don't know if that can be a thing, but I feel that there is some level of self-hate for you to look at someone who is in the same skin that you are and to not view them as a human. I don't know those 5 officers. I don't know what their upbringing was like. I don't know what they do, what's happened to them. But you have to come to some point of hating yourself to be able to enact such violence and brutalize someone like that, and then to make it a game, essentially. Like, you have this man pinned down, handcuffed, and there's 5 of you with guns and tasers and batons, and you think this is fun. So to me, there's some level of hating yourself that you have now found power in that. A book I'm reading right now, 2 of my dear friends, Maya Moore Irons and Jonathan Irons, wrote a book called Love and Justice. Maya's one of my best friends, and Jonathan has become like a brother to me. And they co-wrote this book, and Jonathan was wrongfully arrested and wrongfully incarcerated for 23 and a half years, got a 50-year prison sentence for something he did not do. He was released on July 1st, 2020. And I've gotten to do life with Jonathan for the last almost 3 years. There's a lot I don't know about what he experienced in prison. And he's sharing a very firsthand account of his own experience in prison along with other people. And I've been reading the book, and the anger I have felt as he has described what he experienced in prison, what other people who are incarcerated experience from COs. And I was talking to Maya, and I just was like, how'd you guys do this? Like, I'm reading it now after he's out, and I just feel such rage at the way he and others were treated. And we talked about that. There's in some of those COs, there's some level of, you were bullied, you become the bully. You don't love yourself, and so you respond out of that. And so I give that example of, I feel similarly with these officers, which to me, it makes me sad in a lot of ways. But there's some form of hate within you for you to do what they did, and then to laugh about it. And power, when it is not used properly, corrupts people and systems and structures and institutions. And I would say there is a power that comes with being a police officer, because the law, as jacked up as it is sometimes, is on your side. I mean, we have qualified immunity for police officers. That is a problem in our country.
Another thing that was brought up that hasn't been touched since 2020.
So that needs to obviously be dealt with. But there's a power that comes with becoming a police officer, putting on the badge, having all that on your side, where you can get away with things that you should not be able to get away with. And it mars it for those who actually hold that power and steward it in a way that actually upholds laws and values people, right? Like, there are so many that do that. And then there's a lot like these 5 who don't. And so, but when you don't know how to steward the power that you have, you do stuff like that because you think you're going to get away with it. You don't do something like that and think you're going to get in trouble. That's the other thing. So to me, you do that. And then the EMTs and sergeant, who also have now been fired, I saw. Yeah. Because really it's the whole system that's corrupt. They didn't administer any care to Tyre Nichols. So what was it that the officer said to you, or what hate do you have in yourself that you see someone laying on the ground in the state that he was in and waited, however, I forget how long it was before you said, oh, let's put him in the ambulance and take him to the hospital? Mm-hmm. I can't fathom how you can do that and then see that and not react in a way that is to help a person. So again, sorry, I was going to quickly respond to that, but it just...
No, that's great.
Yeah, it's a self-hate in a lot of ways. And I've, being Black and learning about some of our history for so long, there is this, that's why like we talk about our affirmations or, just trying to uplift one another in the Black community. It's because for so long we've been told to hate ourselves. Like, you're only good if you look this way and you do these things. And so we have a narrative that we have to fight from the very beginning. And for some people, they're able to overcome that and they're able to be proud of who they are and withstand all that comes their way. And there's others who like succumb to that in different ways. And then there's others who say, man, I just want some type of power. So what do I do? Where do I get that from? Okay. If my character is jacked up, that's also a character issue, that what we saw. So my character is jacked up. No one's held me accountable. Now you're going to give me this type of power with this badge and the law. I can do what I want. And they did what they wanted. And then they had to find out the hard way that you don't get off as easily as your white counterparts. So that's where it's even all messed up too. So anyways, I'll get off my soapbox on that one, but I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Yeah, literally it's the abuse of power.
Yes.
Like there's so much like we're having right now, like so many things to talk about and so much nuance, so many different layers to it all, but it so often just comes back to some basic things that I think we lose track of. Like, it's like bullying. Where do we hear about bullying? Like, we hear about bullying in elementary school.
Yep.
And the effects of that. Like, it seems like we can understand it at literally the elementary school level of how to teach that, right and wrong. And then I'm aware this could sound like somewhat naive, but I'm just being honest. And then, do we not teach, equity and equality in some way? I know there's a lot of improvement needs to be made, but like abusing power, like that's like a right and wrong thing that, I think we are supposed to be, at least, my kids are learning that in some way right now in schools. And so it's like, I can just see it's so easy once you see it, like the path of, well, all this other stuff is just under the umbrella of corruption, to be honest. And like, if you're willing to see it, it's, it's not a call to, live in fear and criticize everything. It's just a call to see, oh, this is like, the path is really not that hard to find more often than not. Like when these types of things, are coming up.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by our newly established Patreon. Look, if this podcast has been beneficial to you or someone you know at any point, or you simply just have a few extra dollars that you don't know what to do with, we invite you in to join our Patreon for as low as $1 a month. Look, every single dollar right now is literally going towards an amazing cause. That is not code for give us some money so that we can put it into our pockets and figure out what to do with it later. No, seriously, assuming that all of our equipment is not going to just break overnight, literally all of the money right now is going towards helping us give money to first-generation BIPOC college students to help purchase their textbooks each semester. As both John Mark and I hold several jobs in the college space and university settings, this cause is just really, really very aligned with our heart for the podcast. Although we are starting small, we really believe that the importance of generational change and education is a perfect way to launch this Patreon and this endeavor. So, look, if this is something you are down with, please go over to patreon.com/racially speaking right now to join that community. Is it fair to say like this is also kind of under the same umbrella of when people try to use people of color, specifically like, Black voices, to push, a white agenda or something? Like, I don't want to go, I really don't want to go down a rabbit trail, but like connect it to like a Candace Owens or, somebody like that, a Jason Whitlock. If you,
Lord have mercy.
If you, don't listen to Jason Whitlock, y'all.
Don't, no.
Sports people. He's kind of a sports person, but not really. That feels more lighthearted than, somebody being brutalized by the police. But to me, that's connected. Like,
the sentiment is still the same.
You're harming people.
Yes.
Like when you're up there saying what you're saying, like you are harming people. And I think there's also got to be some level of self-hate as well to say some stuff that some of those people say on national television about their entire communities. I say their communities, meaning communities of people that look like them, that they come from, that they're willing to ostracize and throw under the bus literally for their platform and gain that's connected to this sentiment, which I've just, like I said, we've talked about like this whole, is this worth it thing? Like, that's why I just keep trying to connect. Like, yes, I see the value in conversations, individual heart change, transformation. Like, yes, that needs to happen. Like, I believe that's up to God. Like, I can't change someone's mind about something, but ultimately, like, we just gotta be honest, like, justice at its core is a life and death matter. So like that's, I think, gotta be focused on at the right times. I'm not saying that to have us just always be down in the dumps, because then we really wouldn't be able to do it. We wouldn't be able to move forward at all. But that's got to be, especially in this case of like, all right, like there's nothing else to talk about, because we need to figure the big issue out now. Like, I know a lot of times we're told to like take these smaller steps, like be planned out. Yes, be planned out, but balancing that urgency is just, for me right now, I just feel it like in my bones. I'm just like, I don't want to talk about anything that is going to not have us move quickly and have the quick result be that less people die.
Yeah. That's real, David. And I said this when I shared my video. Benjamin Crump, he's an attorney. He represents a lot of people when things happen like this, and it's happened a lot. And he, in one of his posts, he made a comment essentially of saying like, I hope this will be the catalyst for change. And my response to that, to myself, was, why do Black people have to be brutalized at the hands of the police for there to be some catalyst for change? And also, didn't people say that same thing when George Floyd was murdered? So what actually is the catalyst for change then, is my question. And I think that's just a wrong, no shade to him at all. Because I think underlying that is this like deep desire for this to change. So I'm not shaming him and him making that comment. What I want to do though, and even naming that, is we're missing something if we keep saying that when, in this case, when it comes to police brutality, Black and brown bodies are continuing to be killed, continue to be brutalized. I don't understand that sentiment when how many children have been killed at school and people say, I hope this will be the catalyst for change for gun reform, and nothing has happened. Like, we literally can take so many different examples and fill in the blanks there and ask the question, like, why does it have to be this and this and this and this to be a catalyst for change when people don't really want to change? And so I think it's a really challenging place to be in when we want to see this macro level change. I want to see that too. Like, we need to see gun reform in this country. We need to see reform or completely changing the system of policing. Like, we need these massive macro level changes. And I legit don't know if they're going to happen, maybe in my lifetime. Right. And so I think there's that reality. And then to wrestle with, okay, like, how do I be faithful to what's in front of me, and keep praying and doing the work in community, to not let go of that, to not just say like it'll never happen or whatever, but to still try to be committed to what we're doing. And it's just, I think, a tension we're going to be living in, and people have, I think there's seasons for people where you have some people who commit their life to this work, and then you have some people who do this for a season and then things change, for different reasons. Like it does, like people burn out, like it does become too hard, because there is a massive toll. I don't know if you guys remember Tatiana Jefferson, 2019, was playing video games with her 8-year-old nephew. Neighbor called for a welfare check. Police shot and killed her. So
in her house.
In her house, yeah.
Yeah.
So since then, her family was fighting for the officer to be held accountable. Her nephew's been traumatized. Not long after she died, her father passed away. Not long after that, her mother died. Yesterday, her sister died. All the reasons they attribute to congestive heart failure. The result of now this young, I think he's 11 now. He's lost his mom, his aunt, and his grandparents in the span of 3 years. That's what you talk about, life and death. Like that's what we're talking about. That's the toll on communities of color who are disproportionately affected by all these things. And so I think for me, I see that, and I see the wake of that. And so I'm asking the questions, okay, Lord, this is what I feel called to and committed to with the work that I do, not just, it's not a hobby. It's not anything like that. Like for the work that I do, and the spaces I have, like I feel committed to that. Help me still to be faithful to that and to still engage and still challenge people. I'm not going to fight with people who don't want to learn. I think that's the shift I've made. And so David, I think I just want to encourage you, actually, is what I want to do right now. Not to minimize what you're wrestling with. And I think keep wrestling. Like that's a good place to be. And I believe the Lord will meet you in that. And if something if you do need to make a change, you make a change, and that's okay, or you keep doing what you're doing, and to trust that God is using this space with this podcast and other conversations you have locally in the work that what you're doing, in your church, things like that. I think to be reminded that it matters. Because I don't want to give up, I don't want to give up hope, but I don't want to give up on the opportunities we have to do good, right? And to steward what we have in front of us for the time that we have it, while also lamenting that we don't have gun reform in this country, that this country cares more about guns than it does its people. They say they don't, but that's true. A lot of people. Our people don't want to see policing change because they don't have an imagination for it. This is all we've known, right? Violence is all this country has known. Like this country is literally founded on slavery and genocide. Like that's all this country knows. The Second Amendment is like Bible to people, right? And so that's what we're working against, and that's hundreds and hundreds of years that we're working against. And yet we still keep fighting, right? Like we still keep doing the work. We still keep challenging people. We still keep trying to hold people accountable. And by God's grace, some people will get elected into positions of power who are actually able to enact some of the change we're talking about. I think I want to, my optimism, which really is not around much these days, it's coming up right now. So I'm just going to lean into that. I'm a little optimistic that with the increase and like some of the understanding and even politics and things of that nature, that we'll start to see some different elected officials into spaces Because that's part of what we need, right? Policies have to change. We need people who are going to be able to enact the change that we're talking about. We're going to need people in place where the George Floyd Policing Reform Act doesn't sit on someone's desk for 3 years. In the same way that the new Voting Rights Act, after the Supreme Court gutted it from 1965, it sat for so long until it finally passed. I think 2021. It's set for like a handful of years. And so we need that, but we need people like us too, you know, like I think what we do matters. And I don't want us to miss that, but holding space for you and the like wrestling, both can be true, right? I think we can hold space for both of those things.
Yeah.
So
I appreciate you, as always. And like I said, it was a great reminder, just, you know, in the last few days through conversations I've had with people and the Lord and just my own time, of also realizing that even the whole time I've done, you know, this podcast or the other conversations I've either led or just had one-on-one in smaller groups, it could also be, I've realized, and it's been comforting, a disservice to those conversations to view those as not mattering. So it was good, a healthy like conviction to realize, okay, I've prided, you know, myself on having this small space to have these conversations for people that need to hear them on a smaller platform, and, you know, people that, you know, I rub shoulders with or even know, and to look at it and be waver with big news stories going on. You know, like you said, like I appreciate that, like is human, but it was comforting to realize, okay, like, but these little things do matter. I'm not in control of all of it. So who knows what difference they can make. And also if they don't, like, I know they have, because at least I believe that yesterday. So it doesn't mean all that's untrue now because of, you know, everything going on. So, I mean, that's been comforting, and to, you know, having spent time cultivating, like you said, the community that we have across, you know, the internet here, you know, 2 separate podcasts. I think even like the timeliness, like we kind of coincided with when we started it inadvertently. Mutual friends we have, and then, you know, this separate, you know, friends we've had that, I'm just really thankful for those communities that we've cultivated, to use, you know, that verse from Esther, and then your friend said, like, for such a time as this. Shout out to John Mark too. He's given several talks using that story. So again, wish he was here. But I was also struck when you mentioned, shout out to your friend too from the beginning of the episode, but like where you said she used that phrase as saying, for such a time as this is why we do it, almost like such a time as now, I'm ready for it. And I'm struck by that, because I think I would have liked to think that was me. And I feel the healthy weight of, man, there's something, I don't say wrong, I'm not trying to beat myself up, but it's been cathartic to think about, oh man, my foundation was shaken a little easier than I even realized it could have been. And yeah, there's something that I need to be honest about in this. It doesn't mean zero-sum game and give up, but it does mean, why wasn't that my reaction when I think I would have said, oh yeah, I'm ready. Like I'm ready. Like I'm nothing's going to shake me. I'm not going to give up. And then like that, I was like, is this worth it? Like asking that the next minute. So, you know, that was, I just want to be transparent for people listening of where, I don't know, like the ins and outs, I guess. I don't know, the depths of where this can take us sometimes. In these spaces. Couple What I mentioned, honestly, my mentor that I mentioned and a friend, actually this is two separate people, but in the large book, whole 3 chapters, Habakkuk, and in scripture, this hit the nail on the head. This is what I was going to say. It's like, man, I would never have thought to go to this book, but she sent me this. This is Habakkuk 1, verse 2. So, O Lord, how long shall I cry for help, and you will not hear? Or cry to you violence, and you will not save? Why do you make me see iniquity? Why do you idly look at wrong? Destruction and violence are before me. Strife and contention arise. So the law is paralyzed, and justice never goes forth. For the wicked surround the righteous, so justice goes forth perverted. And I mean, that hit the nail on the head for me of like, okay, this is me. Like he's asking God the same questions, we're asking. And, that was comforting. And then another verse was Ephesians 6:9. Or no, wait, I lost it. It's the one, do not grow weary in well-doing.
Galatians 6:9?
Yeah. I'm in Ephesians. Yeah, Galatians 6:9. Yeah, and let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. So kind of those 2 verse sections have been kind of comforting for me to meditate on some. Yeah, all right. So we're coming up coming up on that hour mark, and I wanted to kind of end a little bit with some maybe helpful advice for people listening. But I also, before I ask this, don't know if we're going to be able to give any. But I did want to say, like, I think maybe the backdrop for people listening, and this is even for me a little bit, but like, how do we do what we're saying? You know what I'm saying? Like, and move forward. Some things that come to mind are like, I think the threshold is different for everybody. And a lot of times it can be, oh, I'm going to start caring about this because my friend is this or fits that demographic or was affected because they were around that area or stuff like that. And in fairness, we talk about, I think we both said stuff like that to people in the sense, and with that sentiment of like, imagine if it was, me or this person that we know, like that's why we should care. I think there's truth to that because I think the personal connections matter. I can also get very cynical with that sentiment because that comes back full circle of it also shouldn't take that happening. Like you shouldn't take your friend having a bad experience with the police, especially much less being killed by the police, for you to believe that police brutality is a real thing and something needs to be done to stop it. At the same time, there's always terrible stuff going on. I don't care about everything the way I care about this. I think that's kind of almost the rhetorical question out there in people's heads. Help us out. Like, what do you have anything to say to that of like how we can move into helping or caring about this stuff actively, I guess?
Yeah, that's I mean, you can't make someone care, I think that's part of what we've tried to fight for a little while, I think that's some of what came out in 2020 was like, what y'all been doing, where y'all been, we need you to care. Like, this is real. And it's literally all over the social media. And, again, here we are almost 3 years later. And so, yeah, I think that's why I'm at even a point of like, I can't make someone care about police brutality or gun reform or the plight of the Black community. But yeah, I can be faithful to point people to resources. I can be faithful to share. And I think it's hard because, like you said, I don't care about all the issues in our world, in our nation, right? And so I've grown, I feel like, in my capacity to hold that tension. I think I will speak to people who say they follow Jesus, like you would proclaim to be a follower of Jesus. I think our part of being a follower of Jesus is we care about our neighbor, and our neighbor, right? Someone asked that question in the gospel, it's to Jesus. Well, who's my neighbor? Right? It's people. It's not just who's next door to you, right? And so that is part of what should propel us. If we follow Jesus, right? Like the compassion and the love of Jesus is what should compel us to care to some degree. I'm not saying people need to take up arms and, be this racial justice advocate now and all those things, right? But are you being faithful in the spaces that you're in, whether it's having conversations with your family, or it's who you're learning from, even when it's uncomfortable, right? Like some of those voices, whether you're reading or you're on a podcast or maybe a news source that you don't typically listen to, just to hear another perspective, right? I'm not saying I agree with every perspective, but I do think it's challenging. But again, I think the heart of it's like, I can't force people to care about this. So if you don't care, just say you don't care and let's keep it moving. Right? Like, but if you say you care, yes, it's overwhelming. I get overwhelmed. Like, literally, like we're grappling with so much that has happened at a national level. Mind you, I carried a lot of grief with me from 2022 into this year. I had a lot of loss in my family. And then literally 2 days after Christmas, we had to put our dog down of 12 years. For non-dog people, you're like, okay, but like it unearthed more grief for me and my family that carried over into the start of this year for me. So like everyone's got their own stuff that they got going on too. And then shooting after shooting after shooting, police brutality, like a war in Ukraine, like we were inundated with so much tragedy around the world. And so I get that it's overwhelming. My encouragement is like, fight like being paralyzed by all the tragedy, right? We pray for certain things. There's certain things that we feel God compels us to act on. There's certain ways we engage. But to not engage at all is not to like honor God or to be faithful to what it means to follow Jesus. So I don't know if I'm really answering your question, but because it's a very broad, complex answer.
I set you up and I said we might not have anything.
You did. So I would just say, if you say you care, you have to ask yourself the question, how does that actually show up? Like, am I just saying it? And I think we need to kind of audit ourselves. And I need to do this, right? Like I have to check myself, because I can be huffed up like, oh yeah, like this is what I do. And I know these things. And I'm like, check myself like, okay, Alethea, when have you spent your money in this place? When have you thought about this? When have you read about this? When have you been in these spaces? When have you checked yourself when you did feel that stereotype come up? Did you actually address that? I have to do that. So I think there's an opportunity for us now, 3 years later from the intensity of 2020, to take some inventory and audit and say, okay, I do care, but what does that look like? And where can I grow? Man, I haven't checked on my bookshelf in a while, and I'm missing some things. Or, man, I need to switch up my podcast and what I'm listening to. Or, dang, there's that group I've been meaning to check out locally that I've maybe just been afraid to. Why have I been afraid?
Yeah.
What's stirred up in me? Ask those questions and then lean into that. I think that's part of, and doing it with people. Like that's the part. I was just on the phone with a friend earlier today. She's white. She lives out in California. And she was sharing with me just some intentional choices her and her husband have made with their kids, where they play soccer and football and all that. And they could go to the bougie, rich white spaces, but they're like, no, we're not doing that. We're going to be local in our community, which means they're engaging with a lot of Spanish speaking families. So she's helping translate emails. And she gives an example. Their middle son, he's 10. They were going to pick up a couple of their friends. This is just normal for these boys. And her son said to them, it sounds like the dad is angry, but I don't think he's angry. I think he's speaking in Spanish, and I just think his tone is different. And I was like, there it is. 10 years old, he picked up on a cultural difference, and he didn't demonize it and say it was anger. It was, this is just how this plays out culturally for him. And she was like, I teared up when he said it. She said, but then I had to check myself because what rose up in me from what I've been, the ideology and the things I've been told for like almost, 40 years of her life. And so I'm like, gosh, kids have so much to teach us. It was so beautiful. I love that she shared that with me.
That's amazing.
It's something like that where a kid points something out that's just normal for them. What do I feel? What am I feeling? And then am I engaging in community to wrestle with those things or to say, hey, David, can you come with me? Like I want to engage this, but I'm nervous or I'm scared or I don't want to say the wrong thing. Can you go with me? We're only going to grow and really, I like to talk about like collective healing, collective like liberation, because if I experience liberation and you don't, we're missing something. So we need to be doing more things together and not just on our own to try to fix ourselves or be huffed up on pride that we're doing so much. So I think when we're in community with other people too, it actually helps us be held accountable and also encourages us and exposes us to other people that may not be in our current sphere of how we're learning and who we're doing life with. Yeah. That's my answer to your question.
Oh, that was great. Loved it. No, seriously, man, that's really helpful. I don't have anything to actually add to that. I knew I was going to ask that, so I thought a little bit about it, but this is a good segue because I'm going to plug you a little bit as we wrap up. But man, I'm okay saying that I think people listening, like y'all, especially our white friends, like y'all could share our podcast, like with people on social media. Word of mouth is great, but social media is, I think, to me, I was just thinking, I was like, okay, what's some, like sharing it like in your story or like saying, writing a little something about, I don't know, like writing a review, doing something and like showing some solidarity and doing that. Like some people that's going to seem like a really big deal. Some people are going to seem like that's really small. I think it doesn't really matter. It could be both. I think that it's in the grand scheme of things, it's very small, but I think you agree, Leith, like people who like you're not yours, but like people listening, your followers, when you start to post stuff like that, people are going to think something about you. And I don't say this lightly. I say this like individual level, like that is, I think, a way to consider entering into being open about being real about this stuff. And, it means something different coming from our white friends. It just does. I'm not purposely trying just to like, hey, you get out there and advertise for our podcast by any means. What I'm saying, that's just something that concrete that came in my mind of like, it does. I do like literally see it make a difference on like who shares certain things. What I'm not saying is everyone go out there and be somebody you're not. Like, listen, like I don't repost stuff that I don't read. Like I don't repost just a Instagram graphic that's like referring to an article that I haven't read. I try not to do that because I don't think that's the way to go about it. I also don't want people to not listen to our podcast and just post it because they like know us. That might seem like a nice sentiment, but no, I think part of entering into it, like this is a good example, like posting it means that you also stand behind it. Like don't be willing to take the smoke that comes at you if it comes of like, oh, you agree with what they're saying on here. I don't know. You don't have to agree with everything, but be willing to have that be a conversation starter for you. And then, concrete things you can keep doing is, be informed, but then voting matters. I know that can be a whole nother conversation. As you talked about, people died for the right to vote. Like it's something we take super lightly, but is extremely convenient and easy to do for most of us. But yeah, vote, be informed. I think is another like concrete way. But speaking of sharing our podcast, Leith, I just listened to the intro to season 2 of The Roll Down.
Yeah.
Thank God it's coming back. Oh my gosh.
Hey, no, for real though.
Yes. Man, I'm so excited. I'm actually kind of annoyed that you put out just an intro and it wasn't an actual episode, because I was like, all I saw was that season 2 came back and you said that. I was like, all right, I'm gonna get a minute. I'm gonna listen to that. And then I was like, I don't need to hear an intro. I know what this is about. I want to hear an episode. So anyway,
That's fair.
roll down.
That's fair.
Yeah, roll down. Leith and her co-host Matthew Melendrez. Yeah, man, it's so good.
Thank you.
I think we talk about some similar things, listeners, but you should check. I mean this, like the way I think y'all said. I mean, I'll see like there's like tiers, like the majors, the minors, and then like double A. I'll give myself a double A, be triple A, and then like, because you guys in the intro referred to like Pass the Mic and Truce Table, which it's like, it's the major leagues.
Yes,
but then I'm gonna tell people, you said pause if you haven't listened, and go listen to Pass the Mic. I'm gonna say pause. Fine, listen to y'all. Man, it's so good. Part of the Chasing Justice.
Yeah, part of the Chasing Justice podcast network.
And you guys, man, give a little. You guys did a whole intro episode. Everyone listened to that, but can you give I say elevator pitch for what season 2 is going to be about?
Yeah, great question. And I received that. You don't want an intro, you want an episode. I feel that. Which we actually do in our episode coming out a week from Thursday, whatever it is, February like 9th or something. We actually use that to share more of why we were away for a year and a half. We didn't want to do that in our opener because it's really heavy and it's a lot. And so, thanks for even just acknowledging it and just celebrating with us, because it really does mean a lot. It took a lot for me and Matthew to be able to get back behind the mic and have the capacity to do what we're doing. Life really tried to take us out in a lot of ways. Not to us per se, like not my body, but really my body, in the way that so much grief and trauma and loss happened over the last couple of years. So anyways, it just feels really good to be back. We are really excited. So yeah, some of what we are wanting to do with season 2 is not just be reactive to things, but really create space for what does it look like to engage in like collective healing together, and how do we do that? And so we want to resource people. Matthew and I have been through some stuff and are equipped in some new ways, and so we want to share that with people. We have similar tracks and then things that are very different in our lives too, and so we want to help resource people as we are as we're centering people of color, a very, again, broad audience in that sense. But that's some of what we're wanting to do. And so what does healing look like? How do we resource one another? How do we celebrate things together too? And so there's definitely will be heaviness in there. And then there's just going to be some really rich stuff too. And it'll be more, Sandra actually challenged Matthew and I to, show up more of just the two of us. We had some bomb guests in season 1. If you guys haven't listened to season 1, I'm going to pitch that. It was incredible. We
both true. I agree. Like,
God was so kind to us.
Phenomenal guests.
We were shook every time people said yes. We were like, what?
Yeah, great guests.
Podcast? What?
I love to hear more from y'all too.
Yeah. So we hear that, and we're excited about that. So people will get to hear more from us too, and who we are, what we're doing. And it's an honor to hold that space. And I think it's, like you said, you want this space to be cathartic and, healing for people, that we want that to be the same for the roll down. It's very cathartic for Matthew and I, and it's a very healing thing. And we hope that is for people who listen too. So that was a really long, 25 floors elevator ride.
Yeah, it's all good.
Yeah.
Sandra's episode on Be the Bridge was fire. I love that. That episode was amazing.
Sandra's amazing. She really is. It is an honor that we get to be part of the Chasing Justice podcast network and get to work with her and be mentored by her, along with Tyler Burns. So Pass the Mic, it just is such a gift. So shout out to them, because that's part of what contributes to how our podcast is. So
Absolutely.
we don't do it alone. You know, like I was saying, you need people, and we do it in community.
Yeah. So, all right, we're not always about stats, but I mean, seriously, y'all go listen to the Roll Down when it comes out February 9th. I mean, y'all shared this. I'll just like double down. Like,
it's out though. It's out. So just, subscribe.
Yeah, subscribe. Oh, yeah. Subscribe, do the reviews, do the 5-star thing. You can also do that for mine too. But
yes.
Wait, did you mention, like, I mean, you put this out there, so I'm just going to, 15,000 downloads on season 1? Y'all, I'm not going to say all my analytics because I'm not going to show all my cards right now, but that's a freaking ton.
Yeah.
That's for a season.
I'm still shook by that.
How many episodes was that?
18.
Okay, yeah. That's nuts. Okay, congrats. That's amazing.
Thank you.
I know y'all never like that's that's crazy.
Yeah,
y'all aren't doing it for the numbers, but those numbers are nice.
Yeah, and it does mean something. Like I'm able to hold numbers, I feel like, loosely. I have this tension a lot with results and numbers. Like I just do. Like I don't it's so much more than that. I don't want to minimize it either. Like I know that's significant, right? And the fact that people are listening and subscribing and episodes are downloading and people are engaging it. Like that's what that tells me. Right. And so it's very overwhelming. Like when I saw the number, I was like, what the heck? Like how Sway? Like how, God, and also like so humbled and so much gratitude, that something that we talked about in 2018, 3 years later, that's kind of what it's been. So anyways, I appreciate you acknowledging that. And I know I need to acknowledge it. I don't want to minimize it. And I also, I don't put too much on that, like I'm grateful. I feel like that's what it tells me. It's like, I'm just really grateful. Like God's doing something with it. So I'm going to keep being faithful to show up, to do what we can for the time that we can.
Absolutely. Receive that. I'll let you go. Thank you so much for coming on. As always, you'll obviously be back. I don't even need to say that. Shout out John Mark, we missed you, but we'll do it again. Best of luck with season 2 on the Roll Down.
Thank you.
I'm eagerly anticipating the release of the rest of that. Look, thank you guys, especially if you listened to the last 2 episodes. Like we've been talking about the whole time, it's helpful for us personally, but we love engaging with all y'all that are listening. Thank you guys. The music you're listening to is done by our guy Dylan Dent. Our artwork is created by Ashley Bush, and we'll see y'all next time.
The nightmare might scare you, no worse than reality. They hunt you by day, R.I.P. Ahmaud Arbery. Everybody got a time, but that's less than comforting. I hope I'm alive by the time they choose to comfort me. Mosquitoes in the vein, or leeches on my soul. This money on my mind is a fracture in my bones. You get crippled by continuing existence like a ghost. And they wonder why we drink, and they wonder why we smoke, and they wonder why we think that everything's a joke. I'm shocked that we can sleep, must be the thought of letting go.